I really want Oregon to get Ryder Lyons. Dude's an incredibly talented quarterback. He's not the guy I want Oregon to get most right now.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. A scorching hot take on the quarterbacks this year. I love hot takes. Hot takes and Spencer's scale of agreement might be the best thing I've ever done on this show, at least my favorite thing. JD Pickell compared Kenyon Sadiq to Brock Bowers. I like but don't love that comparison necessarily. I'll explain all of that on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, Ryder Lyons is the five-star quarterback recruit, for those who don't know, that Oregon is likely prioritizing above all other quarterbacks for the class of 2026 after Jared Curtis committed to Georgia. And so they made the offer to Matt Ponatoski, the four-star quarterback who's got a bunch of other offers as well. Maybe they wind up getting both. Ryder Lyons is LDS, so he's taken a one-year mission, is what I have been told, and he's really a 2027 recruit. That's part of the reason, if I were to rank Oregon's recruiting priorities and who they're going after, who they've been tied to, Ryder Lyons wouldn't be my number one. Would he be outside my top five? No, of course not. Do I want them to get him? Yes, I do. Tremendously talented player. Tremendously talented guy. Maybe the best pure thrower of the football in this 2026 class, depending on who you talk to. But the reason I say I wouldn't have him as my number one priority is because he's not a true 2026 recruit. Doesn't mean I don't still want him. I remember, it feels like yesterday, that Gatlin Bear was discussed on this very program by myself as a big-time get as a five-star wide receiver. He took, or is taking, I should say, a 2-year LDS mission. And suddenly, we're like just over a year away we're less than a year away from seeing Gatlin Bear suit up in an Oregon uniform, I believe and hope, in the 2026 spring game. So we're not that far away. So time flies when you're having fun. I have a lot of fun doing this show. I hope you all have fun listening to or watching it. But for Ryder Lyons, certainly that gap should be taken into account, but it shouldn't be something you just makes you completely disregard. Oh, who knows? There's so much time with this. Like, I've never heard a peep on Gatlin Bear, and he committed to and I believe signed with Oregon, is on his mission, and I don't think he's going anywhere else. So the Lions question is, do I want Oregon to get him? There are two questions. Yes. Absolutely. I'd be disappointed if Oregon doesn't get him after not landing Jared Curtis. Do I think that it's as big of a priority? Not necessarily, because of the way Oregon has recruited and retained quarterbacks over the last couple of cycles. And maybe I'm reading too much into one spring game in a good way, but hey, I'd rather do it in that direction than in a negative direction. I really loved what I saw from the quarterbacks back at the end of April at Autzen. I cannot get the image or go back and watch the film again from those guys and how well they played and the high-level throws they made, the progress of Luke Moga year one to year two, the development of Novosad continues to look really good. I think the timeline for Oregon quarterbacks works out that if they were to not land Ryder Lyons, they'd still be in a good spot. They'd be in a better spot if they have Lyons in the fold. But without a 2026 recruit, obviously they go and offer Ponatoski, and we'll see if they wind up going to get him. I think this Oregon quarterback room can go on as is without a quarterback in 2026, which means get Ryder Lyons, don't get Ryder Lyons, don't land Ponatoski, and I think the quarterback room can still be all right. Now, do I expect both Dante Moore and Austin Novosad on the roster in 2026? I do not. I do not. I think you either have Dante Moore pop off beyond my expectations and go to the NFL draft, or more likely, Dante Moore does well, but he returns for a second season, Novosad transfers, and goes to be the starter at Baylor. That's my prediction. And I think Novosad could start at Oregon one day. I just think Dante Moore is really good. And I think that's but we'll see how this year goes. We'll see. There are a lot of variables that can change between now and then. There's a reason Novosad stuck it out in this spring transfer portal window, and I'm really glad that he did. I hope that production-wise, if, God forbid, Dante Moore were to get injured, he could step in and be a Brian Bennett type, where you look at him and go, that could be a starting quarterback, but at the very least, we can go out and win a couple games with him. Backup quarterbacks, the ultimate insurance policy. You never think about it until it's the most important thing in your life. So, I like where this Oregon quarterback room is, and the other aspect of Ryder Lyons essentially being a 2027 recruit is that if you don't get him, look how much time you have to go and recruit other quarterbacks in the class of 2027. And I'm sure that's gotten underway. I mean, I think the craziest age kind of, not difference, but, just class of recruit that I've seen Oregon go out and offer since I've been covering the show. I think it was last year there was a 2028 kid, which is recruiting, man. Dana Altman first, saw Jackson Shellstad play in person, I'm pretty sure in 8th grade. So this stuff can start really, really early. But Lyons is maybe the biggest name that Oregon's chasing out there. Not the only big name. There are a lot of other ones as well. There's Tyler Atkinson, number 1 linebacker in the class. There's Mark Bowman, who's a 5-star tight end. Kelvin Obot, O-B-O-T is how it's spelled. Apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. 4-star offensive tackle, which is certainly a position I'm looking at after Cody Green flipped to Washington a while back. Jet Washington, a safety in the class. Anthony Jones, 5-star defensive lineman. So there are a lot of other big-time names out there. I don't want to look, and I don't want anyone to look at this recruiting class and think, oh, got to get Ryder Lyons, or else, where are the other big names out there? They're starting to trickle in. Recruiting season really starts to heat up in the month of June right now. Everything's just kind of getting primed and ready. And yeah, you had Richard Wesley commit, not that long ago. That's Oregon's last commit, 5-star edge prospect. And, I've got plenty of messages about, oh, his dad said this, and is the recruitment done? You never know. You never know. It is still early in the cycle. It's not the craziest thing to think about. I don't know how many kids make a video like the one he did with Dan Lanning and then, seriously open up the recruitment elsewhere. But, hey, it's 2025 in college football. Crazier things have happened out there, to be sure. But yeah, Ryder Lyons is someone who Oregon should place a premium on and should go after. You've got BYU in the fold. You've got USC primarily in the fold as well. Ole Miss. I think Michigan has kind of tossed their hat in the ring. I think that's, a little bit more of a dark horse right now. The 4 that I expect to be going after and have heard for a while are going to be after Lyons are Oregon, USC, BYU, and Ole Miss. And yeah, the LDS connection certainly makes you look at BYU as maybe more of a player than they otherwise would be, but every school's got its advantages in some capacity or another. So yeah, I think the recruiting priorities for the Ducks should definitely include Ryder Lyons, and he's one of the top. I just don't see it the way that I kind of saw the Jared Curtis commitment where, and based on how Oregon has handled quarterbacks and recruiting in this class, I think they did have a lot of eggs in that Jared Curtis basket. Unfortunately, they fell out and broke, and he committed to Georgia. But life goes on. You just say, okay, let's go on to the next one, and maybe that'll be Ryder Lyons. But I think there are plenty of it. Brandon Arrington's another 5-star Oregon's been tied to over the last couple months. He's committing early July. USC in the fold there for a guy who plays both ways. So there's still a lot of big names. Oregon's recruiting class ranking in 24/7 Sports has fallen down to number 18 in the composite rankings. It's May. That can rise. It was outside the top 20, went up to, I think, number 13 when Wesley committed, and then other players have committed to schools across the country, so Oregon's fallen back a bit. But those are some names just to keep an eye on in the coming weeks as visits get taken or maybe even outright commitments. You never know. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. It's hot take season. It's May. Of course it's hot take season. A bold prediction, self-described bold prediction on the quarterback room. That would be it'd be fun. It would be fun. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you wanted to bet something related to Oregon, perhaps, you can do that. Did you know that? Yeah, not Oregon... Insert other sport. Oregon football is what I'm talking about. I'm sure you could track down some other sports, but football is, of course, what we primarily talk about here on the show. You've got a win total, 10.5, tied for the highest in all of college football. You've got Big Ten title odds, second only to Ohio State. National title odds, top 5 nationally. How about that? How about that? Ahead of Alabama in the national championship odds. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? All that and more is available over at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time. It's a perfect time to sign up. You head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Boom. Bingo, bango, bongo, you're done. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Can't have a good show without a second segment sip, can we? I don't think so, no. I don't know if I've ever done a good show without one. At least not that I can remember, but I forget a lot of things. Okay. We're back to hot takes. So if you want to submit a hot take, question, comment, concern, statement of outrage, all that sort of stuff, and all of those come across the YouTube comments, the Twitter mentions. Not as many statements of outrage, but some from my Locked On Ducks insider crowd. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. You get priority mailbag access. You get a bunch of other perks as well, delivered right to your phone. And you can talk one-on-one with me all the time. So one of you sent this question over. Quote, it's unlikely, well... That's not the best way to start a hot take. But, he says, but I have a bold prediction for this season. Neither Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, it should be Austin Novosad, keep the starting job. Whoa! I think both have a poor performance in the first 2 games, and Luke Moga continues his hot spring and starts against Northwestern. That's the 3rd game of the year, and leads Oregon to a 9-1 record. Oregon finishes 11-1, but mostly thanks to the defense in the first 2 games. So I'm curious, in this bold prediction, is Luke Moga taking over for 2 quarterbacks who didn't play well but won the first 2 games? One of which is against Oklahoma State out of the Big 12. Interesting. I forgot to add that Moga will come in the second half against Oklahoma State and tear into them. Ah, yes, there it is. Okay. So... Dante Moore plays against Montana State and looks overwhelmed. Novosad replaces him, starts against Oklahoma State, doesn't look good. Moga comes in, tears it up. Oregon goes 11-1. On the hot take meter, this is 9.9. I hesitate to give things a 10. On Spencer's scale of agreement, that this could happen. 0.1. 0.1. Again, I hesitate to give it a 0 because, it's college football. Oregon once had a 5th-string quarterback come out, and pretty sure they went and won the Sun Bowl with Justin Roper at quarterback. Dude was 6'6" back there, slinging it behind center. So, I'm not in huge agreement there. I respect the boldness. You see why he prefaced it with, it's unlikely, but I have a bold prediction. That's about as bold as it gets. I think the more interesting discussion that you're sort of nibbling around the edges that I'm now going to steer the show towards because, well, that's kind of how this program works more or less, is does Luke Moga have a chance to pass Austin Novosad as the backup quarterback? I think that feels a lot more likely now than it did 1 month ago, pre-spring game, to us, those on the outside looking in at the program. And, of course, Dan Lanning, Will Stein, and the entire staff see the stuff every day and have all the information that we got at the end of April. But that's why I'm really happy that Dan Lanning says as long as I'm here, there's going to be a spring game. Thumbs up, 10 out of 10, 5 stars, no notes. But I think that for Luke Moga, he has a trait that neither of the guys in front of him has. Dante Moore and Austin Novosad are pocket passers. They're not immobile. They can move. Neither one even runs as much or as successfully, I think, as Dylan Gabriel. You know, you think about the best plays that Dylan Gabriel made last year. I think Novosad and Moore can make plenty of them on the run. Like the throw against Wisconsin on 4th and 9 to begin the fourth quarter after Dan Lanning hit the Uno reverse card with jump around there in Madison. Gosh, that was good. One of my favorite Ducks versus Thems ever. And I will never hear Jump Around by House of Pain the same ever again. I will always hear Dan Lanning going, when you hear that song, every time. So that sort of throw, both these guys I think can make. But take, for instance, the long touchdown run on the speed option against Oregon State, or the RPO touchdown run. It was like 27-ish yards against Ohio State to take the lead in the fourth quarter. Those are not plays that Will Stein is drawn up for Novosad or Moore. Like, when those guys run for a first down, I think we'll all be holding our breath going, oh, please don't get hurt. Don't get hurt. Not that they're, fragile or anything. It's just not something they do. It's not a feature of their game. Whereas it is the primary feature for Luke Moga. And the passing has to come along and join that. But he is an elite athlete. He's one of the 4 or 5 best athletes probably on the entire team. So I don't think that Novosad is, based on what we've seen in a place, I think it's more likely Novosad starts than Moga passes him for the backup quarterback position. I really do. And I like all three. As I've said, I like all 4 of the guys that are in this Oregon quarterback room. I really, really do. They're different. They are, able to do a lot of the same things well, but they have identifiable characteristics or traits that can separate them or distinguish them from somebody else. And for Moga, that's his athleticism. So I've always looked at Luke Moga, even before he had the great spring game where he was one of the biggest surprises and standouts of that affair. I've always looked at him and said his ceiling is Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson's the quarterback at Kansas State. They were in the Big 12 championship picture last year. They will be in the Big 12 championship picture again this season. And he's kind of a dark horse Heisman finalist going into 2025. I think that is Luke Moga's ceiling. Like, I just look at the two of them. I didn't look up their measurables before the segment. I imagine they're pretty similar, but they are running quarterbacks who you are asking the question, are you good enough throwing the ball to be a high-end starter? And Johnson, I think, got better and showed glimpses last year, and we'll see what he does this year for the Wildcats. But I just think that Moga's athleticism doesn't make him more likely. Well, it does make him more likely to be the backup quarterback. I do think that's going to be Novosad. I think it makes him more likely he sees the field more than Novosad this year. I've been asked this question before on the show. This was, back in March, I think. And someone asked, hey, could you see Luke Moga being a part of a Wildcat package? Yes. I'd be so down for it. Because as I said, it's not what Dante Moore does. And when you are a mobile quarterback, you don't just learn how to get out of the pocket, how to run, how to protect the football. You learn how to protect yourself, how to take hits, how to avoid hits, get out of bounds, all that stuff. That's not what Dante Moore's MO is. That's not what we're going to expect to see from him. And so I could see a situation where Dan Lanning and Will Stein get down inside the 10-yard line and you put Luke Moga in the game and suddenly the quarterback is a threat to run. We saw this with Penn State last year. Bo Pribula was the backup quarterback who's primarily an athlete. He's now at Missouri, probably going to be the Tigers starting quarterback in the SEC. But he came in just to run. Everyone knew he was running the ball. It doesn't matter. It's still hard to stop because you have a numbers advantage now. Or at least the numbers, get even because the quarterback's a threat to run the football. So I could see that. I would legitimately, not just for the sake of keeping Luke Moga around or rewarding him for the work he's clearly put in the offseason, I think that is a good idea. If you get down in the red zone, I'm not saying you never have Dante Moore throw passes in the red zone, but if you want to run the ball, you get down 3rd and goal on the 1 and you want to run it and have a guy who's also capable of, throwing a little pop pass or something. Yeah, I'd be down. So I love the quarterback room. That was a bold take from one of my Locked On Ducks insiders out there. So JD Pickell of On3 gave a not so bold take, but I loved it anyway. All right, I should say I liked, not loved, liked this take from JD Pickell over at On3. He compared Kenyon Sadiq, who I'm a big fan of. We're not having the tight end discussion today. Don't worry. We're not going down that rabbit hole. But he compared Kenyon Sadiq to Brock Bowers. Now, I love that take from a play style standpoint. Those two guys can do all of the same things. And if Sadiq has a big year, he go be a first round pick. The reason I say I like the take is I don't want Oregon fans to expect him to go out and have the sort of statistical year that Brock Bowers did. So Bowers at Georgia, here were his 3 seasons from 2021 to 2023. 56 catches, 63 catches, 56 catches. And by the way, in 2023, he only played in 10 games. I think he got dinged up, but still had 56 catches. For those of us that are math majors at home, not me, but some of you maybe, that's about 5.5 catches a game for a tight end on average. That was a lot. His yardages went 882, 942, 714. Again, that 714 came in 10 games. So if he'd played a full season, would have had a 1,000-yard campaign in all likelihood as a tight end. As a tight end. His touchdowns went 13, 7, and then 6 that third year when he didn't play the whole season. And he ran for 56 yards, 109 yards, and 28 yards. Fun question to think about. Does Kenyon Sadiq hit 100 rushing yards this year? It's really hard to do. Sadiq has the ability to do it. Now, Sadiq in his first 2 years as a Duck, 5 catches for 24 yards and a touchdown, and then 24 catches for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns. I won't be surprised if he roughly doubles his production this year. That would be, to me, living up to the hype that I and others have set for him in the offseason, because stylistically and physically, he is very similar to Brock Bowers, who is listed around 6'4", 230, according to Sports Reference, and Sadiq is 6'3", and Drew Maringer, I think, said earlier this year he's around 250 pounds, can still run 22 miles per hour. Physical freak, not like anybody else. So these guys are tall, big, athletic, and good blockers. So Sadiq actually was a higher graded tight end by Pro Football Focus than Terrence Ferguson last year. And Ferguson got drafted in the 3rd round, I believe it was, by the Rams. And I, love that fit for him stylistically, but why do you have to go to a team that I'm rooting against? That happened so much in the draft this year. So much for me as a Seahawks fan. It was brutal. Absolutely brutal. Jordan James to the 49ers. Jordan Birch to the Cardinals. Jeff Bossa to the Chiefs. It was driving me insane. Connerly to the Commanders, though. That's an easy one to root for. So, anyway, back to the subject at hand here. So, 2 reasons that I don't think Sadiq puts up Brock Bowers type numbers. Reason number 1. Oregon's receiving core, way better than what Georgia had in those few years. That has been, especially in 2023 and then 2024 after he left. Georgia's passing game last year was not as productive. It was still good and capable. They led the country, I think, or led the Power 4 in drops because the receiving core wasn't good. They have not recruited and developed, which is always a fun topic of conversation when it comes to Oregon, of course, amongst some fan bases more than others. And anyway, different conversation for a different day. Georgia has not recruited and developed wide receivers in a big way. Brock Bowers was the passing game, and the receiving core wasn't there. Those 2 things really, really important for expecting a certain statistical output. So Bowers was the go-to guy, and Sadiq will be one of the go-to guys. If I, and I'll do this off the top of my head, rank Dante Moore, let's presume he's a starter, who his favorite targets will end up being, Kenyon Sadiq could get to number 1. I think he'll be number 2. Evan Stewart, number 1. Kenyon Sadiq, number 2. Number 3, I think is going to rotate around. It'll be a DeCorian Moore week. It'll be a Justice Lowe week. It could be a Kyler Casper, Jurion Dickey week. It could be all sorts of guys. The receiver room is just completely stay. Gary Bryant Jr., like lots of guys that I think could rotate through for that number 3 spot. I think the 2 most consistent targets will be Evan Stewart 1 and Kenyon Sadiq 2. And there will be weeks. I think there absolutely will be weeks because Sadiq is such a unique athlete where he feels like the number 1 go-to target for Dante Moore. But the other reason why I say, stylistically, I love the comparison to Brock Bowers, but statistically, I don't know that he gets there, is tight ends have been used consistently in this Oregon offense with Will Stein. Have they been used so far to the same extent to where Sadiq could look up and he's caught 50 to 60 passes this year? I don't know. I'm not saying Will Stein doesn't have the creativity to do it. I also know that his offense has been wildly productive the last couple of years. And Terrence Ferguson, I don't think Terrence Ferguson even hit 500 yards last year. He had, pulling it up real quick, he had 43 catches. Oh, he did. 43 catches for 591 yards and 3 touchdowns for Terrence Ferguson. And remember, for a long time, we were wondering week after week because Oregon was beating the brains out of everybody. We're looking for things to nitpick, I guess. When's Oregon going to throw a touchdown to a tight end? And then that finally happened, of course. But 591 for Ferguson last year. I can see that being the case again. This receiver room, I think, is every bit as deep and talented as it was a season ago, even without Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden. Crazy thing to say. I didn't even mention Malik Benson. He could be one of the top targets. It's just going to depend on, how the game plan's going, where Dante Moore is looking, and all that sort of stuff. So, 591 yards for T. Ferg last year, and he had 43 catches in 2024, and then the first year with Will Stein in 23, he had 42. I think Sadiq could get 50. 60 though, with this much talent in the wide receiver room, that's asking a lot. So I love the way that we started to see Sadiq get used more last year. Like the progression was great. To go from being almost a non-factor statistically in the offense in 2023, 5 catches, 24 yards and a touchdown, to 309 yards and 2 touchdowns, which came in the Big Ten championship game, which I think kind of showed us that the development and progression over the course of the year was there, and they felt like he was becoming more and more of a go-to guy. They'll get him the ball on screens. They'll throw it to him more down the field this year, which, you go back and watch his highlights against Purdue. He's really capable of that sort of stuff, and he's just a tough matchup. You need a safety like Caleb Downs at Ohio State, or, Javon Holland from the past at Oregon, or Dylan Thieneman, frankly, the Purdue transfer who will start for Oregon at safety. You need that caliber of guy to guard Kenyon Sadiq one-on-one because he's just a matchup nightmare. He's 6'3", 6'4", 250 pounds, incredibly fast, leaping ability, good hands, ball skills. Like, there's nobody like him. But you can get him the ball on screens from the tight end position, get him the ball on screens out wide. Stein last year used him a lot in, motion situations where, he'd catch a tunnel screen, and they used him on the 2-point plays. They handed the ball to him on fly sweeps. That's not normal tight end behavior. I love Terrence Ferguson. You don't throw him a tunnel screen. You can do that with Kenyon Sadiq. So the uniqueness, like the potential, if, Oregon were to have catastrophic injuries, and by game 3, there is no Evan Stewart, DeCorian Moore, or Malik Benson. Yeah, okay, now Kenyon Sadiq could have an 900 yard season. But kind of, and I've mentioned this with DeCorian Moore throughout the spring, the beauty of this Oregon offense is you have all this talent, and these guys can go out and put up these numbers. You don't need them to. I don't need Kenyon Sadiq to have a 900-yard season for Oregon's offense to be productive. I don't need DeCorian Moore to have a 1,000-yard season for the Ducks to have a competent passing game. DeCorian Moore could have 400 yards receiving. I think a lot more than that. But he could have 400 yards receiving, and Oregon's passing attack will still be really good and really capable in a lot of different ways. So I like that take from JD Pickell, who I think does a good job. I see his clips around on social media, and I saw that one and thought, you know what? I can turn that into a segment on the show. And what do you know? Wish it, want it, do it. If you get that reference, give me a message. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.